All right, so welcome. I'd like to thank you all for joining us today. This is the second in our series of the Future of Education, the LEAF webinar series for 2021, where we are focusing on the future of learning, the future of teaching, and the future of education. In this series, we're focusing on the future of teaching when we're going to be hearing from a lot of our speakers about project-based learning with the addition of agility. Before we get going though, for those of you who aren't familiar with LEAF, kind of wanted to give you a short, brief history. And then I'll, talk a little bit about our speakers and then we'll actually jump right into it. So, the journey that LEAF started about 18 months ago, really, it started along with the beginning of the pandemic, and it came out of a realization that schools were lacking the ability to pivot given the constraints under which they're operating, which is something that businesses and government have been able and practicing and mastering for the last 20, 25 years with the introduction of agility. And it was really that realization that, had me start down the path of, well, what would it take to actually bring agility into education? It was an interesting journey in the beginning. We really thought that we were heading down the path of the, Scrum Incs. And Scrum Alliances and Kanban universities, where our intention was to originally put together 2, 3, 4, 5-day courses with the goal of certifying educational professionals, be they, leaders in education institutions or what I call frontline workers, teachers who are actively engaged with ensuring that our students are getting the highest quality education that they can, regardless of the constraints under which they operate. And it really quickly became, well, I say real quickly, it took us about 10 months to realize that that was totally the wrong direction to be going in. For those of you on the call who are familiar with agility, who've been working in an agile way, you probably realize that learning agility is a lot like learning to ride a bicycle. And I'm not sure how many of you actually ride bicycles, but if you do ride a bicycle, you probably didn't learn it by going to a 2, 3, 4-day class or reading a bunch of books or watching videos. You learned it by getting on the bicycle. And agility is really kind of the same kind of modality in that you have to practice it to get good at it. And it takes the building up of muscle memory, the learning of certain skills, putting them into practice, and then gaining a degree of mastery over them so that you can begin to, for yourself, for your team, for your customers, start to generate the value that you're looking to deliver with a greater degree of ease, right? With a higher degree of confidence. I'll often tell clients in the business and government sector when engaging with them that when it comes to an agile transformation, there's really only 4 metrics that we can go ahead and impact. We used to call them the QP metrics, QPPE, for quality, predictability, productivity, and engagement. Quality, speaking to the overall quality of the work, less defects, higher rates of satisfaction. Predictability, speaking to the reliability that an organization can have to the commitments that are made by the teams to go ahead and deliver specific pieces of value, functionality, or capabilities. Productivity, which is simply the aspect of introducing lean system thinking so that we can maximize the amount of value that any given team can deliver when we understand that they're operating with a fixed and limited capacity. So the trick isn't to get them to work more hours, it's really to get them to deliver more value with the limited amount of hours that they have to work. And which also often brings me back to one of my favorite principles of agility, which is simplicity, the art of maximizing the amount of work not done. And that really does speak to that idea of increased productivity. And it is one of the main drivers behind how it is that teams can go ahead and deliver more given the same constraints as they've always operated under, simply because they've stopped doing things that are not delivering customer value. And lastly, it's engagement. How can we ensure that our customers are delighted with the product that we're delivering to them? How can we ensure that the people who we trust to actually build and deliver that value to our customers are also fully engaged, and we have high levels of employee satisfaction. And so, we realized that after 10 months of heading down the path of, creating these 3, 4, and 5-day classes, that this was not going to be an ideal approach to going ahead and introducing a new way of thinking into the, into the learning and educational sector, that it really would take a slightly different model, one that really involved taking the journey. So we started practicing and experimenting with what we call immersive micro coaching sessions. So we do, our transformations are done over the course of 6, 8, 10, 16 weeks, and they're done in, increments of, 30 minutes a day, 15 minutes a day, 30 minutes, 3 times a week, thus giving our practitioners an opportunity to learn new skills, practice them with a coach, and then take them out into their world and, continue to practice and gain a degree of mastery over them. So today we are going to be hearing from a wide range of, educational professionals talking about their work with project-based learning plus agility. And it really does look to be a very exciting event. So we're going to go ahead and meet our speakers, and we're going to be starting off with Heather Kawab. Am I pronouncing that right, Heather?
Yes, you are.
Excellent, excellent. She's going to be talking about UDL and various means of, for educators to go ahead and leverage it in their classrooms, and it looks to be an exciting workshop presentation. Then we're going to be hearing from the founders of the Agile Mind, Jessica Cavallaro and Rosalind Jackson. Sorry about that, Jessica. You're going to have to drink a little bit of water. Both frontline educators, 7th and 8th grade teachers, who actually took the journey with LEAF late last year, and were actually, instrumental in bringing the framework of learning flow, our approach to bringing Kanban at scale into the classroom, and helping LEAF as an organization to gain some really good feedback from students. We had, right now where it stands is we've had over 1,200 students globally who've been exposed to what we're calling an agile pedagogy, right? Simply by, bringing in some of the practices that, we've worked with their educators, with their teachers, and now their teachers are through, having gone on the journey themselves, bringing these practices and these skills into the classrooms and giving the students an opportunity to go ahead and practice them and gain mastery over them. After that, we'll be hearing from David Hoffman, and we will be finishing up with a partner of mine at the Boston University Agile Innovations Lab, Sriram Rajagopalan. So what we're going to do is we're just going to jump right into it, and we're going to be hearing from our first speaker, who is Heather. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to have to switch over to your presentation. So just give me 1 second.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Okay.
So everybody, I hope that you can hear me fine. I am coming to you from my car in a parking lot because we are modeling what agility is about, right? So I'm going to be talking about universal design for learning. So universal design for learning, first of all, is a curriculum approach, okay? So this is not an approach that's just about what you're doing in the classroom. It's how are we even preparing our materials to present to students. So this is primarily for teachers at any level who want to get an understanding of what UDL looks like in designing their lessons. And then the Agile piece comes in with the tracking and managing a student-centered classroom. I myself began using Agile Scrum in the classroom 6 years ago, and found that the blend of UDL and whatever I used, flipped, project-based, lab classes, along with Agile Scrum, which is very similar to what LEAF is doing with Kanban, really let me empower my students to be independent learners. And I saw the benefit of that when we went into the pandemic, and I had fellow teachers who were struggling to get kids engaged And my classes pretty much ran as they had been all along. All right, so what are our goals? So the first thing that we want to ask is, what is empowerment? What does this look like? Jeff, you can go ahead and enter the next one. What are students doing in your classroom? What are you doing in your classroom? And most importantly, who is in charge of what is happening in your classroom? The second thing to consider is, what is independent learning? Like, what does this look like? What are students doing if they're being independent learners, and what are you doing? And then finally, the heart and soul of UDL is, what are the skills and concepts? We really differentiate between these two considerations in curriculum that students and teachers need to accomplish this vision of learning and teaching. So next slide. So UDL begins, like all good solid curriculum, with the framework that you want to cover. So like understanding by design, which many of us are very familiar with, we begin at the end. But the next thing that UDL does that UBD doesn't ask is, are these frameworks a concept or a skill? As in, what do students need to understand versus what do students need to be able to do? Okay, so that's the next. Yep. And then finally, what is done, right? Now, this is where we begin to embed Agile thinking into how we're looking at curriculum. What is done? Students will understand. Students can do this. Once we have organized our frameworks into these concepts versus skills, we then kind of break out what are the concepts and skills of actually empowering that independent learning. So the next is, what are concepts that we need? Well, we need to talk about our growth mindset. Do kids understand neuroplasty? That mistakes are not failing, and that growth and learning is the objective of education, not just getting an A. And then what are the skills that students need? Well, they need skills like time management, self-management, both distractions and goal setting, communication, speaking up for themselves, and working in teams. A lot of these things that we're talking about here are also aligned with the 21st century learning skills, which are what businesses are telling us they need students to be learning. And they tend to be these softer skills that are around, I believe I can figure this out. I made a mistake. It doesn't mean it's all over. I can manage my work day. I can manage myself. I can communicate my needs and where I'm running into problems and where I have it. All right, next slide. UDL is synonymous for many educators with this idea of choice, that UDL is all about giving students choice. Well, here are some of the choices that we're going to talk about, right? One, concepts. If the framework you look at says this is a concept students need to understand, then we have flexibility in how students demonstrate that understanding. I don't have to have every kid do the same thing to show me they understand the stages of mitosis. I can have some kids draw comic strips. I have kids do interpretive dance of mitosis. They're still showing me the concept understanding. I don't have to have the same product. In the same way, skills require that everybody can do the same thing. Everyone can use a microscope. There's not a lot of wiggle room in how you use a microscope, right? And so they may require things like scaffolding and graphic organizers. They don't have the same flexibility in demonstrating mastery. But you may, for example, say if the skill is you can write an argumentative essay, well, then what you can do is say, what's the topic? You can give some choice around topic. So these are some of the ways that we can allow students greater control and empower their independence in how they're learning and what they're learning. Next slide. All right, so this is to give you an idea of how you can do this. So this is a choice board. It's a popular learning choice used in many different different forms of education. Like you can do this as flipped blended, you can do this as project-based, right? And the idea is that you give a variety of choices in terms of how the kids are going to demonstrate their understanding of a concept. This is one way. One thing that I want to emphasize with teachers is a choice board does not need a rubric for every choice. The focus is on the concept that they're demonstrating. You need a rubric that is focused on the concept understanding, not on whether or not that interpretive dance is a beautiful dance, but only does that interpretive dance show the stages of mitosis correctly. Next slide. And if we're skills, we're looking at what is commonly used in differentiated courses only with some students. So one premise of UDL is that if there is something that's good for one student, probably every student is going to benefit from using that same learning support, like a scaffolding, like guided directions, like think alouds, right? And so rather than saying skills are only for some kids, you say that these graphic organizers and other supports are available for all children to choose to use. One of the precepts of UDL is that when only some kids are selected, or how they often feel, picked on as needing to have to use a graphic organizer, and other kids ask if they can and they're not allowed to, they don't feel special, they feel stupid. If we let every kid use the graphic organizer, we're much more likely to end up with students who all feel empowered to use the tools that are available for their best learning opportunities. All right, next slide. So now I'm giving all these kids choice. I'm laying out these concepts, I'm laying out these skills, I'm giving kids opportunities to choose how they're learning about these various concepts and skills and practicing the skills. How do I manage that? Well, the two big parts of empowerment for independent learning is one, you want to provide guidance in making choices. Suggesting graphic organizers for all students, showing them where they are in the back of the classroom where they can go grab them. Practicing think alouds as you explain how to select from a choice board, and in using those scaffolding supports for learning. And then secondly, you want to establish good, solid, consistent communication practices for tracking progress and for check-ins as they work through the lessons. And what we're going to hear from both Roslyn and from, I'm sorry, I forget the other person, Jessica, is how they've used an agile mindset, how they've used lean Kanban thinking to provide structure that does these two things, right? Especially that tracking progress and check-ins. So what I would say to you is that UDL serves as a foundation for all curriculum, regardless of how you then present it to students. I can use UDL to structure how I'm offering access to understanding concepts by giving kids opportunities to choose to watch videos, to choose to read from a textbook, to choose to, work through maybe a case study or something like that. Or I can give them opportunities to practice skill sets that they need to learn by saying, here are graphic organizers to use if you need to use them, here are scaffolding directions, and then guiding them through that process. How do we hold them accountable and communicate? That can be a Kanban board, that can be a Scrum board, depending upon which way you're actually organizing kids' understanding of how to do these things. So finally, thank you. And you can go to the last slide. Thank you for attending my presentation. Please reach out with questions. And if you'd like to discuss UDL or how this would look like in your classroom, My email is there, my website is there, and I think Jeff also has contact information up for me on my speaker page. So thank you very much, and I'm open for questions.
So any questions for Heather? Thank you so much, Heather. That was awesome. So I'll start with the Simon. Simon has a question.
I've got a question.
Great.
Thank you for the presentation, Heather. I'm just curious to know, as you've applied this, have there been any particular sort of hacks or tips for getting started when students encounter things that are kind of different than they're used to?
So actually, Jessica was telling this story, and I realized it was one that I also ran into, which was the first thing that I think you run into when you make any of the changes that we are proposing in education, and that's problem-based learning, that's any of these, is that students will come back and say, my teacher isn't teaching. Favorite story, parent came into open house, looked at me and said, my student says you don't do much teaching. And I looked at them and thought about it, and then realized what they meant was I don't lecture a lot. So I think one of the things to do is, as you're introducing these ideas, is talk about what does learning actually look like. And my response to that parent was, well, I don't lecture a lot, but I log over 5,000 steps in my classroom every day. And what I would say to the kids is, I can lecture about this, but probably the one question you need answered, you're going to be zoned out by the time I get to that. So wouldn't it be more effective if I just take the time to talk to you in a small group or one-on-one about where you are confused, rather than making you listen to me talk about all the things that make sense? When you set kids up that learning can be much more effective in that smaller group setting, I think then you open the door for kids to understand that they can learn so much more through a problem-based learning class, through a UDL structured class, through a blended class, or through a flipped classroom, because you now have freed the teacher from being at the front of the classroom to being the teacher who is beside them at the table or the desk, working through the problem together. Great question.
Thank you. All right, I see we have another question from Alan.
Yeah, so how do you deal with assessment, huh?
Yeah, and my question is, in terms of, dealing with projects and the students' expectations of their final product, how do you deal with assessment in terms of, is it formative, or what kind of feedback do the students get out of using the project-based learning and the Agile approach?
Mm-hmm. So I would say that, again, when you as a teacher are spending more time one-on-one with kids looking at their work together, you actually have sort of ongoing formative assessment that is just constant. It's not a quiz. It's I'm reading over this question that you have a question about, and I'm looking at where you're confused right there. And I'm maybe reviewing a couple of the questions you've already answered and seeing where you're getting confused and losing track, right? So I would say that in this approach, you actually, your students, where they're struggling much more immediately than if you're waiting for the Friday quiz. I'm also going to say I use these approaches in a classroom that was for a subject area that is a part of our state required assessments. And when I switched to using this sort of blend of approaches, my kids actually improved on their state scoring. For the most part, I had strong proficiency, but I started seeing kids in classrooms where we don't usually see advanced, moving up into advanced. So thank you for the question. That was a good one. Yeah.
Thanks.
I hope that helps.
Okay, do we have any other questions?
This is Sriram here. First of all, Heather, thank you very much for your wonderful presentation. I really appreciate it. One question I have, if you can elaborate a little bit, is for those students that have some special needs, like learning disability or reading disability of some sort, or anything. How has this worked, and what are some of your lessons learned in that particular zone?
So the first thing to know is UDL came out of special education. So the whole premise of UDL came from a group of neurologists who were looking at kids with special needs and trying to figure out how do we help them learn more effectively, and where are we running into sort of the challenges in teaching them. And the two premises that came out of that research was, first, it's not the kids that are broken, it's the system. And second, it's if something's good for one kid, it's good for all kids. What I have found in working with inclusive classrooms, so working with kids with special needs, is that when you treat them not as different, but as saying, look, you're not the only one who benefits from using this graphic organizer. So does the kid that you view as being so much smarter than you because they're not on an IEP. They're like, this graphic organizer is the best thing since sliced bread. All of a sudden, those kids feel much more included, and they feel much less isolated in terms of how they perceive themselves in a classroom. And that inclusiveness, I think, really opens the doors for kids to be able to capitalize on what we also know is a strong contributor to student success, which is peer-to-peer learning. Because now they don't feel like they're the only one who doesn't understand. And also, you begin to find these moments when they understand and it's the other kid who's confused. And that really builds confidence in their own knowledge. And that is absolutely a strength in education. Because I also spend so much more time one-on-one with kids or in small table groups, they get a lot more of that immediate feedback from a teacher that you don't get when you're confused in the middle of a lecture. You don't want to interrupt. You can't pause a teacher and say, can you repeat, right? But you can do that with a video. And that's one of the reasons why, sort of providing multiple means of access to concepts, multiple means of representation for learning the skill is so useful, not just for those kids, but for all kids. And it really meets a lot of the SEL concerns that we have, or the social emotional learning concerns that we have about integrated classrooms.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Heather. Appreciate it.
So we have another
Thank you.
question in the chat from David. David, did you want to ask it, or do you want me to read the question? You can do it either way. I'll read the question.
Okay.
All right, well, go ahead, ask.
That's fine. Yeah, so what do you do when you get students that kind of get stuck in those traditional learning strategies, and they essentially ask for that checklist of tasks? Like, I'm just not creative, and just give me step 1, step 2 so I can do it.
Well, that's where choice boards become a gift, right? Because you can say you don't need to come up with and create your own project or your own product. Here's a selection of things to choose from, right? And some of those selections can be more traditional type products. They can be, the classic poster or the PowerPoint presentation. They can be, a short story or an essay about a process. And then kids can really select what their strength is or where they're comfortable in terms of explaining or demonstrating their understanding of a concept.
Okay, well, excellent. Are there any last questions, or are we good to move on? Well, thank you so much, Heather.
Thank you. This was great.
All right,
And again,
really-
please feel free to reach out if you have any other questions. I always love talking about this stuff.
Excellent. All right, so next up, we have from the Agile Mind, we have Rosalind and Jessica. And do you need me to present, or actually I need to, who's going to present? So I can make one of you a presenter.
I've got it, Jeff.
All right, then let me make you a presenter. All right, you should
Yeah.
now have the ability to share as soon as I stop sharing. All right, you should be able to share now.
There we go.
There you go.
Oh, no, we're skipping. Okay. Roz, you ready?
Yep, I'm going for it. So first, thank you for inviting us to speak today about how to create an agile classroom. What we do with the Agile Mind, you can go ahead. What we do with the Agile Mind is we are trying to help teachers bring those real world skills that Heather was just talking about into education through methods that are going to foster student engagement and that are going to empower them to take charge of their own learning, just the way that she was talking about before. So you can go to the next one. What we've learned with COVID is that everything and everyone has been impacted worldwide, particularly education, okay? As teachers, we already knew that the system was flawed, all right? But now, because of COVID, students and parents are speaking up about how the system needs to change. So for example, students are begging for more control and input about how they learn and what they are learning. The parents want more options for what their students are learning and where they are going to learn it. And as teachers, we definitely want more flexibility in how we can deliver that content to our students and help them acquire those real world skills that we know that they are going to need when they enter the real world. So over the next few minutes, we're going to show you how having an agile classroom can help you achieve all of those goals.
Okay, so we just wanted to start out because this is a PBL plus Agile webinar, that we didn't know that everyone had some kind of basis in Agile. So we just wanted to share the 4 core values and the 12 principles of Agile. Now, Agile was first created in the early 2000s to deal with software development, but as we've seen over these past 20 years, any industry that Agile enters, it leans out and makes more efficient. And that's because it's based on these 4 core values of individuals getting work done, collaborating, and constantly responding to change. So that means that we're able to be flexible and adaptive in our thinking. And as long as we can accomplish our goals, we can change the routes to get there, and we can adapt to what's going on in our lives. And I think that that kind of thinking is definitely more important than it ever was before. And we all realize that as we're drifting into our second year of teaching through COVID, that you must be flexible and you must be adaptive. And this is a skill that has to be practiced throughout our schools, our school-aged children, to make sure that they can handle the future of whatever's coming. Now, these are just a really casual overview of the 12 principles of Agile. But when you look at them, you can really see how they can be integrated into your classroom. Now, when we come to face-to-face, that doesn't mean, that we have to be in each other's face. That could be over Zoom, that can be over FaceTime. We're going to talk about some technology that can help you with that. But it's dealing with customer satisfaction. Who is the customer? It's the student. It's working together. It's motivating teams. It's constant reflection in the process. It's delivering work frequently. So we were just discussing grades, and it's checking in with your students constantly to make sure that learning is under progress. It's not this free for all where kids just do things and then you show up at the end and there's a big project. That's not Agile, and that's not project-based learning. So it's bringing all of these 12 principles together to lean out systems in your classroom to make learning more efficient for both the student and the teacher. And that's something that Roz and I really want to concentrate on here, is that yes, it's incredibly beneficial to the students. But unlike most programs that we hear about in a professional development, this one actually makes your life easier too. Okay.
All right, so you guys can tell that Jessica and I, we are project-based learning teachers. We love using inquiry-based activities to make sure that that's how we're delivering our content to help our students learn. But what about those teachers that aren't? What about those teachers that have a strict lesson plan that they have to follow? Or they have preset assessment schedules, or they have administrators or colleagues that may not be as willing as we are to try new things. So can an agile classroom work for them? We actually think so. All right. So Jess is going to explain how we can all achieve that goal in a little bit. But first, I want to go over quickly why we should all be trying to achieve those goals. Okay. So When we actually let go and we implemented an agile kind of framework in our classroom, we gave them more choice and voice. So this is what our students were able to achieve. Okay. So when we implemented Agile in our classrooms, our students were able definitely to make more connections with the real world through the content we were exposing them to. I definitely stopped hearing that question. So why do I have to learn this? That was gone. So they were jumping in and applying what they would learn to those real world situations. Now, I'm sure some of you may have students that have those executive functioning deficiencies, or that might need a little practice working and playing nice with others. They might need a little help with that, their SEL skills. So working in an agile framework helps them to do that, because think about this. If your team is depending on you to achieve certain goals that you as the team have set, you definitely have to stay organized. You definitely have to work on your time management. And you also have to work on how you are communicating and connecting with those team members, okay? Students that are working in an agile classroom are absolutely in control of how they learn. They are empowered and they are creating their own learning path, but it's based on those activities that you as their teacher, not just their teacher, but now their guide, you as their guide have curated for them to use as those building blocks to create that learning path. Now, as Jess was talking about, let's look at what we as teachers were able to gain as we implemented an agile framework with our students. So as we let go of control, this is what we got. We were able to differentiate instruction in our rooms. And what's cool about that is the students actually helped us do it, because by choosing which activities, again, that we curated for them, but as choosing those activities, they were able to learn and apply material in a way that fit their learning style, okay? So did all of them get it at first? No. Did they understand the concepts all the time? No, but that happens even when you're doing teaching in a regular classroom. That happens to all of us. But the thing is, you weren't in, or I wasn't in the front of the classroom lecturing to them the whole time. I am able to go around to individual students, to individual teams, and talk to them and make sure that I can break down even further the content or the skills that they need to make sure that they have it for the ones that did not get it at first. And while I'm doing that, my high flyers in the room aren't held back by a lecture with information that they already understand, okay? This process gives you the time definitely to efficiently cover content. And when we say efficient coverage of content, this can mean a couple of different things. If you are that PBL teacher and you need to slow down to make sure that your students can explore those real world applications more, great. But what if you're not that PBL teacher and you're stuck with a district imposed timeline? Do you need to cover a specific amount of content to make sure that they're ready for that state assessment? That's also cool, because what we have found out is when we apply an agile framework with our students, we are able, or the students are able, to cover more because we've removed the wasted time and wasted efforts in the classroom, because the students are controlling how they are learning the content. So we are able to actually expose and create more learning opportunities for them, not less. So with those benefits, we found that we had more time to plan and we have more passion in our work. So we're going to pause here because we have a quick question for you. So if you've been paying attention, you know that we just said that we accomplished more in our course because we have more time and more passion. So this is a question for you. Answer it in the comments. What do you think you could accomplish with your students? First, if you have more time, which all of us want, and then if you have more passion about your practice with your students. So you have 30 seconds, one answer, put it in the comments or the chat. Awesome. Anyone else? Oh, I would definitely answer that.
I mean, I would just like to add on, as you're answering this question, that I think one of the benefits of bringing Agile into the classroom is that passion, is that when we all start out as beginning teachers, we have such a dedication to our students and a want to learn. And every time you get that light bulb moment or that aha moment in your classroom, it carries you through the next week. And a lot of times being a teacher kind of brings that down, just the everyday struggle. And especially now that we're dealing with COVID and all these other things, there's just a lot of stuff going on, and you start to see that teachers are not able to have the same kind of levels of passion as before. But because you're having those genuine interactions, because there's a new way of learning, because kids are discovering new ways, they're always surprising you. So that passion really comes not just from the educator, but from the students as well. It's an incredible sight to see and an incredible feeling to have again.
All right, so before Jessica moves on to the next one, let's take Simon's question because that's a good one. So how have we explained what we are doing to our administrators? Honestly, we made it plain the same way we're doing it to you. We invited them in, showed them the classroom, what the students are doing. We even set up a call over the summer after we first tried it last year to explain to our administrators, hey, when you see this craziness or you hear other teachers talking about it, this is what's going on, this is what we saw, and this is why. To be completely transparent, our administrators were kind of like, okay, this is cool. We're not going to do it school-wide, but you keep it going, and pretty much we're going to wait and see how it goes. And we are in a private school. We are in a private school that is a progressive type of private school. But the thing is, which we already know, change in education comes slowly. And the thing that works and gets that change going is momentum. So as we keep implementing that Agile framework, the students keep talking about this, students keep talking about their parents, teachers walk into your room and they see the evidence and the engagement and the fire and just the excitement that's going on in your room. That's how it's spread. We can't tell you how many teachers come up to us one-on-one and say, hey, how are you doing that? Why are those kids doing that? What is that? And why do you have the stickies all over your wall? And what's happening? And when you explain it to them, they get excited because the kids are excited and because you are excited. So quite frankly, no, don't expect to go into your school and say, hey, I just found out about agility and UDL and PBL in this webinar. Let's do it. Your administrators may not be as receptive as you want them to be. That doesn't mean you can't start. And so as we go through the presentation, we're going to tell you about some tools that can help you just start in that small way and to keep building that momentum to keep it going. So a couple of those elements that you need to remember to start are these. You need definitely to implement student choice. Right now, if you are that person controlling everything that happens in your classroom, you need to find those small ways, whether it's how Heather was talking about with your choice board or some of the activities we're going to share with you, give students choice and voice. That's why. So you have to back off and let them have some control. A tool that we're going to describe for you how to do that is a Kanban board. Definitely have constant reflection about what you are doing, but also encourage your kids and make that a part of what you're doing in the classroom, that they have opportunities for constant reflection with each other and with you. Have an environment that fosters collaborative learning. They can't do it by themselves. And then have constant real world application.
So what we are looking at here is a Kanban board, and this is just a very basic version of a Kanban board. Roz and I have implemented this both on an online version in Kanban Zone, which is included in this webinar, and on our walls. We are lucky enough, we have whiteboard walls, but this can be done on any walls with painter's tape and with Post-its. And what you do with your students is you help them develop this way of thinking about their projects. One of the first projects I launch every year is about social contract theory, and it is really tough for 8th graders to understand. But once you show them how to break down a project into tasks, they put all the things that they anticipate they're going to need to do into their backlog, and then they pull them through to do, doing, and done. And so the way that I kind of explain it to them, because it's not traditional Kanban, is that Everything stays in the backlog until you think you can do it. As a group, as a team, you need to pull your cards out of backlog and put them into to-do. And this is your expectations for your increment time. So that could be a week, that could be 2 weeks, but what do you expect to accomplish in your set amount of time? Then you pull it into doing when everyone is doing it. And then you pull it into done when it fits the definition of done, which we'll talk about a little later, and when it is ready to be handed into me. So what this does, and this should be popping to you because it popped to my 8th graders. I said, why did I make you build a Kanban board? And they said, wow, I was confused about the whole project. I had no idea where to start. But now that I put it all on Post-its and I put it in front of me visually, I 100% understand what I need to do. Then they were telling me, wow, I really don't like working in groups, but this is fantastic because we can visually see what everyone's doing. No one can say, hey, I didn't know that was going to be done. Everyone's collaborating. Everything is transparent. Everything is moving across the board. And the best thing for me when it's up on my walls is that I can walk into my room in the morning and see how everyone is going. And the kids can see how they're pacing themselves. Are they moving too fast? That might signal that there's an issue. If they're clearing cards faster than any other group, there's probably an issue. And they might need to go back and check their work. If they're clearing it too slow, there's probably something going on and they're goofing off a little bit in class, and then they can catch back up. So having this visual radiator of information really helps your kids develop those executive functioning skills and those SEL skills on top of being able to maintain their own workflow. So it's quite an incredible tool when it is implemented into groups of students. And this is what we were looking at in terms of how can teachers plan an entire unit. So we are going to go into more specifics in a moment, but we were thinking if we were a teacher that was new to Agile coming into a unit, especially in this kind of year, what would we need to have in place? And so we decided that this was the big ideas that needed to be accomplished in a truly Agile unit. And so we can start with this, and we encourage you, if you are new to this, start with one thing at a time. Everything does not need to be recreated overnight, but we know we always must hit our content and standards. We know we have to fit a time box. So each unit only takes so many weeks. This is the amount of class periods that we have. Something that always helps me lesson planning, and Roz, I think she can speak to this too, is setting your big ideas or your learning goals. So we like to think, especially beginning teachers, and I teach social studies. So I'm like, okay, I'm going to teach the American Revolution. And then all of a sudden you're overwhelmed with facts about the American Revolution, but they can't know everything. They can only come out of it. Really, kids that are balancing 8 other classes can only understand maybe 2 or 3 big ideas out of everything that you're going to teach. So what are those must knows that kids must absolutely know? So you set your learning goals. Then you bring in your purpose. How does this relate? And this is how kids really learn. I was even talking about my 7-year-old the other day. He needs to learn something. He doesn't know why. He's not going to try. What is the purpose of learning this? How are you relating it to the real world to get that pull from them? What is the autonomy? How are kids going to be able to direct their own learning? And then how are they going to show their mastery? So this is a tool for teachers who are beginning to play with this idea to start to work through. Roz?
All right, so the thing is, no, we're not asking you to get rid of all the tools and all of the great lessons, all of the apps that you use to be able to chuck all of that and be like, okay, I'm going to do PBL and I'm going to do Agile. No, you're still using the same stuff, okay? You are still using that favorite app that you like, that benchmark lesson that the kids, I teach 7th grade, so that the students and the parents come to me. It's like, I can't wait for my child to come to your class so they can build that ROV. I'm still going to build that ROV this year, but now we're going to have and use that process that's going to put those websites I like, the apps that I like, this planning lesson that I like. I'm going to be able to better and more efficiently put all of those favorite tools that I have in my toolbox. I'm going to be able to use them more efficiently with my students so that they can create their own learning path. So all of those different tools are like the stepping stones or the scaffolding that are going to help them choose when they use it and how they use it, so they get the content and are building those 21st century skills that they need to be able to be successful when they leave my class. So always your goal is progress, not perfection. So what Jess is going to do next is go through some of the tools that we've created for you to help you try and transform your classroom.
So again, I just talked about this overall unit planning, and this is just to get the big picture idea. But we encourage you, like when you try anything new, go one piece at a time. So what is the one piece that you would like to try on this unit? And then if it's successful, how can you add maybe another piece, or how do you refine it in the next one until you feel really comfortable with it? And then you can add another piece. This is not an overnight success. This is implementing change in a very stressful job. So we are here to try to support you. So one of the first pieces we were looking at is student choice. So how do you, and Heather was speaking about this too, about a choice board. So how do you differentiate what they can do? How do you give them options? I like to give all of my instructions in videos so kids can access the video anytime. So kids that are asleep first periods can access it later when they're awake. So our kids with processing time can watch it again. So any major videos go on my resources. Work that must be handed in is put aside so that they know it's handed in work. And then you can separate it by videos, reading, types of reflection, rubrics, and all of your rubrics for the entire unit right there. So kids know exactly, there's full transparency from the teacher. So I really like this method of dividing up my work so my kids can go through and see exactly what needs to be done in a unit. We already discussed Kanban. So this again is how kids express their collaboration, how they have transparency, how they're able to adapt to their work. They notice how fast or slow they're working. So it really helps them organize themselves. This one is reflection. So we often hear how important reflection is for learning, but it is so essential. And part of being agile is constantly reflecting on the work that you're doing individually and as a group, because your group needs to function to be able to get to the goal line, but you are an important member of your group. And so I offer my students several different ways that they can reflect. And that means whether it's standing at the Kanban board every morning and saying, okay, what are we doing? What are we getting to done? What are our due dates? How are we moving it? It's reflecting upon their increment of work. It's reflecting upon the entire project. It's just having a 5-minute meeting at the beginning of class and just saying, hey, is there anything that's going on that we need to know about? That's reflection as a group. And then as self, they can have their own reflective journals that they write personally to you. So you can see their progress. They can keep track of it. And honestly, it's a fantastic tool for the end of the year, because when those kids come in, I have 8th graders as like big 7th graders and they leave as 9th graders. That's a lot of growth in a year. And it's incredible for them to look back on those reflection journals and see how much they grew. Next is collaborative learning. So there's lots of different ways. Right now in the middle of COVID, a complaint I hear from teachers is, how am I supposed to do collaboration when my kids have to be 6 feet apart, when they're in masks, when they're behind plexiglass, and some of them are still hybrid learning. And we totally understand that. But a lot of these, all of these honestly can be done through online options. So whether your kids are actually distanced or distanced within your classroom, you can still use problem solving. You can do still informal, quick, collaborative learning where they talk to each other. You can use gamification. It's one of I teach the Constitution of America through gamification. So it can really be taught with anything. So these are great ways that kids get to work together, and great online tools that you can use. And then always the real world application. So this doesn't have to be like they have to change the world. They can. You'll be surprised by what they'll come up with if you can give them application in the real world. So if they're learning fractions, can they make their own recipe? If they're learning about the water cycle, can you look at water issues in the world? And it really comes back to that Simon Sinek book would start with why, because their question is always why. Why do I need to know this? And if you give them that purpose, you never have to really twist their arm into learning. They want to know because they see it. And you want them to be able to take their information from one form to the other. The highest level of learning is teaching and synthesis. So even if it's funny, I just had kids that I had 3 years ago that made a music video about the Declaration of Independence email me today to tell me that they showed it in their A-Push class, their American History AP class, and they got credit for it because it was that good. So it's always the changing of the way that you're showing learning, and that sticks with them for a really long time, as you can tell by my juniors right now. Roz and I actually just started to think about how we can help teachers. Well, we didn't just that, but we decided that we are going to launch our own YouTube page in which we would take teacher questions and then work it out on video so we can save those kind of conversations. We were doing this on Clubhouse and then realized that our conversations were lost. So if you have questions for us outside of this webinar, you want to get in touch with us, please reach out to us. We would like to grow this page as a resource page for teachers all over the country so that we can spread the knowledge of Agile and how helpful it is for both students and teachers. Roz, would you like to wrap up?
Sure. So again, thank you for inviting us to speak at the webinar. We hope that we gave you some small nuggets that you might be willing to try or to spread on to other teachers that are a little nervous about doing PBL or Agile, because as we know, the goal is to help those students actually become learners, not just regurgitators of fact that they find on Google. And absolutely, please make sure that you just, if you go back to that page, if you could take out your phones and then you can use your QR reader if you have it, so that you can find our page again, ask us those questions. No, go forward one. Ask us those questions so we can answer them for you on our YouTube page. And I think, Jeff, if it's okay, we can go back. I saw a couple of questions in the chat.
Yeah, we do have some questions, so I'm happy to read those out. So the first question we have is from Simon. So he's heard that you were mentioning students pulling work. Can you explain what that means? And he's just curious.
If you want, I'll actually use the example behind me. This is what Jess was talking about on the Kanban board. This is actually an example of a Kanban board that my students are using. So it's literally a pull system. So as they are working on one of their cards or sticky notes, this is in their backlog. So when they decide for their group that is actually ready to be worked on within their iterative time period, they're going to move it here. That this is now one of their prioritized lists or prioritized items that they're going to do within that iterative period when they start working on it. So for example, I told them, if you know in your team you're working on this today, then it goes to doing. And then once they are working on it or doing it for however long that is, then once it's done and it meets their definition of done, then it goes to the final column and then I'm ready to check it. Does that help you, Simon?
And so I'm going to ask a follow-up question to that. So understanding how the teams pull the work, have you noticed that the students themselves are pulling the work to themselves? So for example, you may have a team of 4 or 5 students, one student who, they're very artistic. And so they're pulling we need a picture. I'll pull that to me. Are you seeing that kind of behavior as well on the team?
The short answer is yes and no. What I've noticed is it depends on the class and it depends on the team and it depends on the student. What the students are learning through their reflections, and then I see it as I'm talking to them, is they're learning that group work isn't always fun, just the way it is in the real world. So making sure, and I think this was related to someone else's question, even with us being completely transparent with this, there are still times where as the guide, you have to go in there and when you see a shouting match about to happen, it's like, okay, why is this going on? Well, Johnny isn't doing his work. Okay, does he know what work he has to do? Is it up here on your backlog? Who is assigned this assignment? Who was supposed to do it? Is it for the overall team? And then how did you communicate with Johnny that he's not doing his work? Was it just you yelling at him? Did you include everyone in the group in that situation? And if Johnny isn't doing his work, did you talk to Johnny about why the work didn't get done? Did he have practice? Did he have a test? Was he sick? Is something going on at home? And then how can we address that? So this work wasn't done. It needs to be done in order for you guys to go to the next iterative step. What's plan B? How do we get there? How do we pivot from everybody is mad at each other to how do we solve this problem so that we can accomplish the goal that we've set for the team?
I would also like to add to that, if you don't mind, Jeff, is that certain students learn in certain ways, and that's okay. And that's 100% okay. And part of using the Kanban board and using Agile is that you get to pull to your own strengths as well. So if you are a very artistic student and you can learn better through taking your content and putting it into art, you should. And if you are a math-based kid and you want to take your learning about this and turn it into an equation, go for it. You're still learning. All we want you to do is learn. So no, learning is learning. Everyone's different. Everyone's an individual. And that's what makes each of these teams unique too, is that they come together, they build themselves, they're self-organized, which is, we didn't really go into, but it's another step of like building out rounded teams where different people have different strengths, and it's okay because you can accomplish work together, because that's how the real world works. Now, no one person builds empires. We build together using our strengths.
At least not effectively.
And so we have another question from Rosa around whether or not you all have had any experience with preschoolers. And I'm not sure if that is really addressed, Rosa, to Jessica and Rosalind, or if it's more overall addressed to LEAF as a whole.
I taught preschool for 4 years. Do you believe that? That's unbelievable. But yes, and I had no Agile training at the time, but I did teach 3 and 4 year olds. I have a 7 and a 3-year-old now, so a lot of those principles come home. We have been, because of a book that was recommended, there is an Agile board in my house that we are trying to work our family flow through, so the 3-year-olds learning early. And yes, it has a lot to do with play-based education. So these things can come down to the youngest grades. Believe me that your 3 and 4 year olds want to use a pull-based system. They want to organize their learning. They want to color code it. Oh boy, do they want to color code it. And then they want to pull it. So you could break it down into very small increments and get them have that sensory play of pulling, and they will be very ambitious about learning.
Yeah, and
And
just to
the
add to
thing-
that, Jessica, what 3-year-old doesn't want to be the boss of their own day?
Exactly.
I mean, really, all they want is choice.
But the other thing too is, and we're talking about now them using stickies and writing down their ideas about what they want to do, use graphics. Okay, you can take pictures of things that they want to do, whether it's candy, whether it's ice cream, whether it's their TV show, whether it's their book, whether it's an activity. Are they working, or do they have a plan to go to Disney World? Whatever it is, you can make sure that you make whatever they are pulling through that system applicable to that age level. And we talk about at the beginning of the year, we start with our students, how they learn and what type of learners they are. My students laugh at me where I tell them, I like pictures. I mean, yes, I went to college, I'm educated, I have multiple degrees, but explain it to me with pictures and you got me there. So food and pictures are my thing. So whether you are in middle school or high school or an adult, you can all relate to those graphics. Hello, that's why we use these phones all the time. So you can apply it into a way that works for whatever style or type of learner that you have. You just have to try and make the first step.
Yeah, and I will not answer this question on your behalf, but Shriram also wanted to know if you were going to be making the tools available.
Absolutely. They will
Absolutely.
be on our website where they're not up yet, but they will be by the end of the day.
Okay, excellent. Thank you. Any last questions before we move on?
Thank you guys. Thank you for inviting us, Jeff.
It's my pleasure, and I do thank you both for sharing your experience and the amazing work that you're doing. All right, so that brings us to David. David, did you want to go ahead and present, or did you want me to share your deck?
I'll just, I can just share the screen because there's actually 2 that I'll float between. And
Okay, let me make you a presenter. All right, you should be able to share your screen as soon as I stop sharing mine.
okay. So Mural was mentioned, and Rosalind and Jessica's presentation is one of the tools you can use. This is just one example of like the whole cycle that I get through. Typically, when I use Mural for students, so we'll break this down unless we're doing kind of an overview of, hey, this is what we have to do. So the standards-based learning that's in standards-based assessment, if you're also pulling that into project-based learning, this is one of the ways in which I resolve for that, and also use targeting the targeting tool, which really drives from the Alex Osborne, Sidney Parnes creative problem solving model. This is one of the tools that came out of that research starting back in the 1920s. I've had a lot of interesting experiences in terms of going through the LEAF journey here with Jeff, and being able to find this really interesting meld, this kind of hybrid of those two models and the tools and how they flex in and out really well. But I would like to just reiterate a couple of the key points that have just been shared already. In terms of using that agile mindset and even the Kanban framework in the classroom, I've started using the Kanban framework for the first time this year, although I've been applying creative problem solving models and tools and principles like divergent thinking principles and convergent thinking principles into my teaching, going back to about 2004. I can definitely speak to some of the results that Rosalind and Jessica have already noted. For 9 years running, my students showed the highest growth on standardized tests, whether it was county, state, or national. They all scored in the top 10% within the entire district every single time. When I was given a college writing course to teach, first year teaching it, out of the district, I had the highest amount of students that earned the college credit. And there's in a lot of those courses, let me tell you, there were definitely restrictions. There were definitely administrators that weren't really keen to new ideas. There are absolutely ways to weave it in an effective way. If you're ever interested in that and some interesting ways to weave curriculum in, Dr. Cindy Burnett has a phenomenal book. She just did the second kind of run of it on weaving creativity into education. So highly suggest that too. But the student voice, student choice, this is kind of one of the ways we've developed it. And before this even, like we went through the whole ideation phase. This is simply an ideation matrix that I also apply the Scamper tool with from creative problem solving. But, just starting with the challenge statement for the project, modeling that. And then what I did is I just created one of these boards for every single group. And then each group could go through and use the divergent thinking tools and pull things forward as they needed to really set up their plan. And as part of this, and just kind of checking, so, Roz and Jess both mentioned the check-ins. So as they did their research, there was just those different phases. I would sometimes just check in with the group, give them additional tools if they needed it, if they hit a block. So there's those daily, like they said about the steps, coaching versus teaching. Or acting as that guide. I found that incredibly beneficial. The beginning of this year, I even had a discussion with my students where I let them know right out. I'm like, look, I do not consider myself a teacher. I was like, I am your coach. These are the differences, so that they knew what they were getting into. Using the standards to drive a lot of that student voice and choice. One of the things I did this year is having kind of a flexible scheduling. Yes, we definitely have deadlines. We have certain content we have to hit before certain areas. But with the assessment portion of it, one of the things I do is I give students options like this and then allow them to design really their own learning pathway. If they're struggling in one specific standard, they have at any point, they can come to me, use this kind of idea of a pitch, show me how it aligns up with their aligns with the standards, and we'll even do the co-created rubrics a lot of the time up front. And it just gives that buy-in. The other element that I tend to use with my older students, I'm teaching 11th grade and seniors right now, is using foresight, which ties into what Jessica mentioned. Yes, we have learners that they all learn differently. What's really cool about that assessment is that it allows students to see as they're forming groups and going through Tuxman stages of group collaboration naturally, it lets them identify how to more effectively communicate with each other because they see where their creative problem solving preferences are. Are they a high ideator? Are they a high clarifier, developer, implementer? And they also see what comes with that. And I shouldn't say they have a preference for, and that's something I always reiterate with my students. is that, don't identify with it. It's fluid. This can change. One thing is not better than another. They all come with their strengths, and there's going to be pitfalls to them as well. So before I go further, is there anyone that has any questions about this kind of process flow? Want me to zoom in on anything?
So can you zoom in on the upper right-hand corner, right where your mouse is? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So this is where I put just the resource pages. So this was just getting into, okay, what some of them liked just a cleaner graphic organizer. So this was here, and they can just click right on that and pull that up. This was the rubric that we had in terms of aligning up with the analyzation standard. All right. So they could see that. And then what I would do with this is those standards, we would break that down into student-friendly term, and they would make their task specific. So that definition of done, that's that transformation right there, is where they take it out of what's usually kind of confusing language for the students. And then they turn it into, okay, well, I'm deciding, if I zoom back out here, you'll see some of the ideas that they were playing with. And this we implemented last year, just phenomenal projects. And even 2 weeks into COVID, 2 years, or about a year and a half ago, I guess now, within the first week, I was fully flipped onto online, and my students actually produced in that first month some of the best products that they produced all year. So these methods do work very effectively when utilized the right way, and especially when you build that culture and the students know what to expect and how to manipulate it. But you'll see, like here, what might be all the ways to adapt Shakespeare's play A Midsummer Night's Dream for a couples themed wedding event. So I had a bunch of students that they went in that way. I had one student that showed their understanding of the story and the characters and all that by designing a pitch for an entire restaurant. There was another one that took on as if she was an event planner and ran with this and created a really fancy menu. The recipes, Roz, you would love this, tied into all the elements of the play, showed different characterization. It was very creative, very unique. And they were able to hit all the elements of the standards, and they were able to pick areas of interest that they really were able to kind of focus in and play with and have fun with it at the same time. And let me tell you, Shakespeare definitely isn't every, high school, middle school. I think this was 9th grade, so freshmen. Definitely isn't all their favorites, right? So any other questions? All right, I'll stop this current share then. We'll flip over to the other one real quickly. There was some other, what's the other thing I wanted to say? Oh, what I liked about too, what Jeff was saying with the different kind of qualities with the Agile. I also used the 4 Ps to get them to play around with their projects. So looking at the idea of product, process, press, and person. Press being like the time stressors and things of that nature. So depending on where the students are, sometimes throwing that in and having them look at the project through that lens can be extremely powerful as well. And this is only giving me that option. Hold on. Float over to the next one here. How many people are familiar with Mural or have used Mural in the past?
Yeah, I have used it, yeah.
Okay, so a couple. Jess and Roz, have you also used it?
I haven't used it, but I'm familiar with it.
Familiar with, okay.
I've used it just a little. I'm not as good as you.
Got it. Oh, it's time. I'm not gonna lie, it is time consuming. It has a lot of upfront work, but the ability to just replicate those boards, and also you just get specific tools that becomes very powerful once it's built up. But yeah, I'm not gonna lie, there's a lot of building. I mean, you'll see this. I actually used Mural when I facilitated for a cohort of students out of the Baltics. Some people in Agile might be familiar with the fishbone diagram. That's been used, the why what's stopping you. And then you can see where I just have the individual tools. So in preparing these, or if I have a student that just needs it, I can literally just come over here, pull one of these, drop it in there, and then even link the directions. You know, you can add the instructions to give them more step-by-step that give the scaffolding, turning that over to the students to where they're building out their own process flow and kind of assigning, you know, who does what. I've done this where it's not just an outline, but it's really more of that same kind of thing with that agile mindset, or really the Kanban, I shouldn't say the mindset, but the using it kind of like a Kanban board where you can kind of see here and then color code it. That's another way it can be utilized pretty effectively. But this is just another, again, kind of the full circle. So if you're into the project, you're trying to set up the overview and the flow of the project as a whole. You can see how this one was one that we utilized for Animal Farm. So just laying out the kind of key steps, right? That allows them to get the directions down. They have the space where they can do their ideation. This was a tool that I'll be presenting in, what is it, about a week, I guess. But this is a flip off the why, what's stopping you, and ladder of abstraction tool. I call it the solution stairwell. I threw in kind of the what factor, but they start in the middle, and it's really just a series of questions. And every time you get an answer, you continue that question until you get to this level. It's so abstract. And then what the students usually do is go through and set hits. I found this to be extremely powerful, again, with that inquiry based. Again, it allows for that student choice in terms of really exploring their own questions and their own answers, and it gives them that time to really expand so that everyone in the class isn't just jumping on the first thing that pops into their head, and you get a lot of the similar projects. This really opens up the diversity. Another thing that I found too, and it's been reinforced in a lot of the literature that I was reading when I was deciding to really dive into this more in response to the pandemic, I came across a book where the authors highlighted how these kind of approaches also help with the diversity issues. And I came across some statistics I hadn't even known before that, in terms of students and minority, where students aren't, especially being an English teacher, one of the sticking points I had at times was saying, okay, well, we're reading Animal Farm and just saying that's what we're doing. I usually give a lot more student choice in terms of allowing them to pick different books, even if we're doing novel studies. So it's really a big idea area of exploration. So again, kind of going back to Jess and Roz's presentation, starting with the idea and the concepts, and then allowing them to pick more of the content that aligns with that, and just giving them that idea. But again, that's flexible, goes back to the same idea as the choice boards and things of that nature. So this is, I'm definitely an ideator. So for the students knowing this, for the students I have that are high clarifiers, I'll usually give them multiple options, because higher clarifiers, and some of you might be looking at this and thinking that, oh, wow, that would give me a headache. It just seems like it's all over the place. That's the difference between the ideator and that. And that in itself has been powerful for me as well, as knowing this stuff from the teacher perspective and how my own preferences impact the success of my students, or I shouldn't say the success, but how comfortable they feel, I guess, in the classroom. So I know when to offer. If I see students showing, like, starting to shut down or showing, some signs of insecurities, I'm able to pivot very quickly with that and identify what that is and give them just another approach and say, okay, well, what has worked for you in the past? What about this? Do you want to try this? Do you want to just design your own thing? And that works really well. Any questions there? Whoops.
I had another question, David, just sort of similar to what Jessica and Roslyn were talking about. I'm just curious to know how have the interactions been with your departments, with supervisors and those sort of things, as you're bringing these things that are, maybe from the outside look almost mind-bendingly complex, but when you become conversant in the tools and the ideas, you just realize, no, there's just a richness here. How do you handle that, or has that become a problem?
Great question, and I've I've been doing this. I've used these approaches now in 3 different schools settings. So, everything from public to private, from IB to inner city, I've seen it in a lot of different areas. With the one school where I was in Maryland, that it was never really questioned because my students were doing so well. So it never became an issue. When it did become an issue, or say a student wasn't doing well, and then the teachers would look at the biggest, or the administrators, or whatever it was, the biggest pushback I got was with the divergent thinking, because I would give an assignment like, all right, hey, generate 50 ideas for this by tomorrow. And the administrators would be like, that's too much. And I would go back to my class of even 7th graders and be like, is it too much? And they'd laugh. And they're like, no, we can do that in about 10 minutes with the tools you taught us. And it's funny because you could tell they're not talking to the students. And I'm just thinking in my head, it's like, okay, if I scaffold it for this student that you're saying isn't able to do it because that you just come to that conclusion magically, they're not going to hit the creativity because they're not going to have enough ideas to explore to get past that threshold. There's over 70 years of research that shows that first 20 ideas, it's just an initial purge. If you never generate more than 20 ideas up front, you're never going to get that creativity. Well, I shouldn't say never, there's always exceptions, but it's unlikely you're going to hit that new kind of breakout thinking of creativity and innovation. And that's where it becomes restrictive. And that's what baffles me. And I just, I'll put in, I'll apply it. And then usually the students just go above and beyond. So I'm like, okay, you want me to limit to 5 for the student? We're going to do that. And then I'll just give the student an extra motivator of like, hey, if you want to do more, here you go. And lo and behold, they come out the next day and they have like 75. I had a student the one year, 7th grade, on a 4th grade reading level in the Buffalo City schools. He produced over 500 ideas in less than 24 hours. And he and one of his buddies partnered up, and I tricked them into writing postmodern short stories based off of fairy tales. That same year, I took that tool as the Scamper Matrix, presented it at Expert to Expert conference in Buffalo. Anthony Horowitz sat in on my workshop. 3 years later, Once Upon a Time came out. I'm not saying that's where he got the idea, but it was very coincidental. I think he really got his money's worth. So, but the students, they were phenomenal. They working in an area, and that's where it is. Whether you're private school, I've seen the successes working with, lower reading skills, just the students that it's reached that have never really identified with the literature. Just this year, I had a student, and in his own presentation, that's what he really reflected on, was the ability to get choice and being able to identify with the characters in the novel. Because he's like, I've never really read anything from the Black experience. And that to me was just like, you're a junior in high school, seriously? Like, that's never been something you've been exposed to. And I even had a student, she's Hispanic, and she's like, I've never read a book by a Hispanic author. And I'm like, here's some options. And I just brought her a bunch of options. So yeah, I can't reiterate enough that idea of student voice, student choice, and what this brings to that, and how you can engage it effectively. And again, just mirroring what everyone else has just said, it does open up your time, because you are a coach now. Like, that's what you're doing. You're coaching it, and the students have much more success. So any other questions? So that'll do it for me then. Jeff, you're muted.
Zoom is not as easy as it looks.
Right.
So, yeah, you would think after spending between Microsoft Teams and Zoom and all the different tools that we use in business, that I would already, after 40 hours a week on these things, I'd figure out how to use them. But it's always a learning opportunity. All right, so thank you very much, David. Greatly appreciated. So now we're going to basically move away from, or actually move towards higher education. And we're going to get to speak to Sriram, who you teach at, it's Northwestern?
Northeastern.
Northeast. I knew it was one of the north ones, right? So Northeastern. And you also do Agile transformation coaching and training on the side.
Yes.
So thank you very much, Sriram. If you will, I believe that you are already a presenter, and so I'm going to stop sharing so you can start.
Sure. Okay, cool. Okay. Okay, I hope you can see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Fantastic. Again, I would like to thank Jeff from L-EAF, as well as all the presenters that went before me for a wonderful presentation, for this opportunity to present my thoughts over here. And unlike most of you, I come from the scholar practitioner world. I was managing, I was a vice president of a program management office where 40 to 50 different project managers, program managers, product owners, scrum masters, business analysts were reporting into me. And it was a pharmaceutical unit where life sciences unit where a number of different projects were coming along. And I found challenges with people in terms of basic understanding of project management, foundational principles, agile thought process. And it was almost like a pack of cards that people were drawing from their, regurgitating from their memory, from the classes. Oh, I know Scrum, I know this, I know that, but they were really not, able to demonstrate that. Workmanship, the challenges that we seem to continue to see in the schools, in colleges, continue to be seen in the gainful employment areas too. If they didn't want to work together as a team member, I have more tenure, I have more experience, I know this technology more, more of those things rather than seeing the overall business objectives, what the overall team goals are, and things like that. And individual career management was still, absent. People used to come and say, Sriram, I should get promoted. And I'll say, okay, tell me why you should get promoted and what qualities do you have for whatever role that you want. I don't know. I've been in this company for 3 years, so I should get promoted. Tenure is not the reason why you should get promoted. You should act like the person that you want to be before the position comes to you. You should have demonstrate those responsibilities so that I can confidently give you those responsibilities. Nothing happened. And I've been teaching in the high school environment in several universities, the graduate and to some extent doctoral levels. And the same problems continue to exist over there too. Students did not know what they want to select as their major. And 3 years have gone by, like they are almost in their junior year. And I asked them, like, what do you want to be, what kind of a position that you want to look for in real life? I don't know. What are you planning to study? What is your goal? I don't know. But do you understand that you are actually wasting the most important resource God ever gave you? Time. You will never get that back. Yes, my mom gave me the money, my dad gave me the money, I got scholarship, but you are wasting all those resources. But the most important thing is the time that you are throwing away. Are you experimenting something? No idea. So I saw this repeatedly coming up. And even in the undergraduate to graduate level, they were not completely ready for critical thinking skills. They'll come and say a direct quote of someone. And I will say, okay, says who? Oh, this is from Wikipedia. How credible is this? I heard this from my friend. How creditworthy that your friend is. So no ideas about says who or so what. What is the impact as a result of that person telling something? What are you trying to tell? How are you integrating your thoughts into somebody else's thoughts? No idea. So critical thinkings, writing skills, many of those foundational things that people are looking for in a gainful employment scenario, where I can ask, I would like to piggyback my thought process here, bounce an idea with you and tell me what you think. Should we acquire this company? Should we actually get rid of this product? Should we hire this person? Should we actually spend more money and more time? Should we extend this decision making? Absolutely no thought process behind any of those things, except I know what Scrum stands for, and I know what Agile stands for. I can articulate all the 4 Agile Manifesto principles very clearly, and all the 12 principles and all the Agile ceremonies and all the Scrum ceremonies, but you are not able to actually add value. As an individual, if you're not able to add value, how can you continue to move forward in your career, get good performance in your courses, and also be able to contribute to the society? And that's where I started thinking through a lot more. So, I've been looking into these things as an enterprise agile evangelist with Inflectra Corporation, as well as currently with as an assistant teaching professor with Northeastern University, founder of my own company called Agile Training Champions, and an advisory board member for BU Agile Innovation Lab, as well as for global security skills development councils. Okay, so let's talk about what my journey was here. Once upon a time, this is a real story, not a fake story. Once upon a time, I had an opportunity to attend a parent-teacher conference, and this time my son was doing his, just entering about his 5th, 6th grade, so somewhere around the early middle school timeframe in Chicago, Illinois, and everybody was just coming and showcasing what they want to be when they grow up or things like that. In my son's turn came, and he went there, and he said like, oh, when I grow up, I want to be a project manager. And the teacher immediately interrupted and said, oh, you mean policeman? No, project manager. Oh, you mean a firefighter? And the teacher finalized the story for him, and he said, yeah, firefighter, and then finished it and came out. It was just one anecdotal evidence, but I started thinking, what is the teacher actually thinking about project management? Right? My observation was that they are not preparing, the teachers in the school are not adequately preparing the youth for what's outside. The foundational principles of project management and agility were not even present in the first place to begin with, let alone be taught to the next generation. And if you're not doing that, how can we actually generate the next generation of leaders? That's when I created my movement called Projecting Leaders of Tomorrow, that I call PLOT. Okay, an example of world to today. I showed my son a floppy disk, and he said, wow, you 3D printed the save icon. This is how the world today, they are very comfortable with technology. And if you ask them a question, they are going to ask their brother or sister, which is Alexa or Cortana or Siri. And they will get the answers like that. Why do I have a calculator when I can ask Siri a question and Siri can find this information for me? Why do I need to know this information? Because Alexa can find this information for me. And this is how the world today is moving on, right? Fortunately or unfortunately, certain basic foundational things still have to be within us. But are we preparing them without these tools to actually perform their work? Sometimes we are becoming so much tool dependent that they are not able to actually do any work. If I give my web analyst without any particular tool, like no front page, no Dreamweaver, no nothing, and I ask him to go and develop it, he can't put together a website, but I can put together a website with simple Notepad. Right? So that's the challenge that we are continuing to have, because we are becoming so much dependent upon millions of tools, but not necessarily understand the basic foundational things that need to go inside the tool. So the bridge that our generational students, gainfully employed, potentially candidates, that are going to be looking for a job. That bridge, we as teachers are not walking, because we once upon a time walked a bridge that does no longer exist for these people, right? So we have to become very conscious in recognizing the new bridge that they are having. If not, we are not going to be setting them up for success at all. Now, that doesn't mean that we are not doing everything that we need to do, right? We do understand the generational gaps. We do understand the realities of time pressure. We do understand there is a big cultural fusion that's happening right now, because today the schools have a lot more fusion of generations compared to 10, 30, 40 years back, right? However, we still have some more work to do, because technically these members are more savvy. And so we need to understand that there are apps that currently exist where you can put together a one-page document and it will paraphrase as though you wrote it, so that you will not be caught for plagiarism. The attention span to engage people are becoming so small that they are looking for what's in it for me next. My ability to satisfy myself should be immediately present. I take an exam and I have to immediately see the results. A while back, I took my son, asked him to write a letter to my mom in India, and he wrote the letter and he posted it in the mailbox, and he came home and said, let's call mom and grandma and find out whether she received it. And I said, like, oh, that's not the way it works. It has to go through the whole mailing system and reach. Then he said, like, what's the point? I could have sent her a text message. I could have sent her an email. It would have been immediately received. That's almost the time frame, because all their thought process is depending upon the tools of today, not the processes that exist. And we are becoming so much an impatient entrepreneur. We want to try something and it doesn't work, leave it, and let's move on to next one. Let's move on to another one. Agile focuses on experimentation, but experimentation does not mean that you try, one major this particular semester and another major in the next semester and another major in the next semester. That's not the way Agile is supposed to be working, because you still have a product goal and you have an iteration goal. And the product goal is not changing from building an airplane to a ship, right? So we truly have to understand what's going on in the world. And for the youth, it's not as bad as the direction we are giving is this, like go here, go there, go here, go there, go here, go there. It's not like that. However, we are telling you the next right turn is on your left. So the thought process is, what do they get? Oh, sure, whatever. That's how they're thinking, because they're already having limited time span, and they are impatient, and they're looking for all kinds of ideas. But at the same time, they are very curious, they are very innovative, and they want to try something. So my initial approach was learn the foundational principles and then apply them. Just like how we are saying, experiment, just apply them and practice them too often. This could be as simple as improving the way you write, improving the way you speak at the beginning to begin with. So my own approach of self-initiated approach is to bring happiness to the seniors. I tried that. I brought a group of people and said, like, okay, let's try this attempt of how do we bring happiness to the seniors? And immediately they started thinking of, let's put a website together, let's promote these ideas, let's put a Facebook message. But the seniors are not on website. They are not technically savvy to understand what they have to do. If you say we are going to have a gathering in this particular place, they're not going to understand this. They don't understand what your QR code is. And if you say social message, they're not in any of the social media message platform to even relate to this. And they started thinking like, okay, then what do they want? First, understand who your stakeholders are. These are the seniors. So understand what they want rather than what you think they want. So I took them to the Lexington Square, a place, a senior home, and got permissions from them. And I took them over there and they asked, a bunch of seniors, with all the things. I facilitate that conversation with them, but all these are a bunch of 6th and 7th graders. They went and did this whole thing themselves. They asked a lot of questions, and out came a big revelation for them. Oh, all they want to see is their grandchildren and their sons, and have some fun time together. And that's pretty much what it was. And so they arranged, well, now I use their strengths to their advantage, lead them with your strengths, right? So I said, like, okay, they're having a Thanksgiving party, or they're having a Christmas get together. They can go, and their son or daughter are not able to travel from wherever they are. So put together a few computer workstations. You are familiar, so use their computer knowledge that you have to connect with those members and let them see stuff, their children, their grandchildren. There you go. That was it. That was a simple thing that they did, and everyone was, the seniors were happy. And then they came and did some small, children's show, distributed some candies, and that was it. All the seniors were talking, reminiscing about their own children and old days, and they were very happy. It's not putting a website. It's not promoting things that you wanted to do, but it's what they wanted to do. So basically, bringing the same thought process began. What is it that they want to know? And in your career, who are the stakeholders? Your parents are stakeholders. You are your own stakeholders. Your teachers are stakeholders. And so try to understand from that aspect. And then, immediately things started clicking for many parents, as well as many of the students themselves. My product actually started taking shape. So the project delivery principle. So please note that I did not say traditional project management or adaptive project management or agile project management, Scrum, because all these things are nothing more than a set of tools. Everything actually emerged from Lean. For instance, root cause analysis that people have to do has been present since 1950, when Carol Ishikawa started that whole process. Lean management principles has been present for quite a long time, which is where Agile even came from. The progressive elaboration has been present since the first edition of PMBOK 1, which we now call iterative and incrementation. So lots of these foundational principles are pretty straightforward and simple, but we actually lost them. We actually are creating more of what failed, and then we are trying to apply them in the new world, and we are creating the Scrum Board, the Fragile, Agile Fall, and all other elements that do not work. So I bring basic principles over here. So focus on main areas that really you have to understand, and you have to pick and choose how it works, depending upon where you are. So understand people, process, and the environment. Who are your stakeholders? Who are all the people that you are going to support you, lobby, that you have to do, coach, get the coaching that you need, and get the work done. Because at the end of the day, if you don't care about the people, then you are not getting your projects done. And people don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. So bring the focus on the process. What is the focus that we are trying to accomplish in the next year, in the next 6 months, in the next 3 months, in the next semester? This week, my work every day at my home starts with what's going to be a successful day today. This has been the case with my son, with my both my sons, as well as with my wife, and we have been continuing to do that. And the environment in which we operate, whether it is business environment or an academic environment or a profit environment, non-profit environment, what is the environment within which you are operating? Understand these 3 things. And from there, try to apply the transparency, inspection, and adaptation. And within that, you understand a gamut of all the different knowledge areas that you really have to understand. What is it that we have to do in the next so much schedule that is available? Your time is as important as my time. How much money we will have? Not everything comes free. Most decisions are based on the absence of money, not the abundance of money. And what is quality meaning like for you? I have had people that submit many work for regulatory submissions, for the FDA submissions as well as for company submissions and things like that, that get rejected primarily because they didn't follow the PowerPoint template that was required for them. There is a process that needs to be adhered to. I cannot go and say, I don't like the color red, so I'm not going to stop the car. Certain things are given to you. And the risk, and I oftentimes ask people, even in my, employment setting, I ask them like, how many assumptions do you have? I have 4 assumptions that I have documented for this project. And I say, okay, how many risks did you have? Oh, I don't have any risks. Well, assumptions are all mother of evil. And if every assumption is supposed to go wrong, how many risks do you have? So people don't connect those things. Who are your stakeholders that you have to work with? At what stage do you engage them? What level of communication do you do? Because you engage people too early, they don't like it. If you engage people too late, they don't like it. And if you over communicate, they don't like it. If you under communicate, they don't like it. So what is the optimum level of communication you need to have with different types of people? And the whole process can be repeated for all these knowledge areas. So I try to bring concepts to these things in a very simple settings. The simple settings that I introduced are everybody goes on a vacation. Parents can go on a vacation, teachers can go on a vacation, business people can go on a vacation, students can go on vacation, everybody can go on a vacation and they can relate to that. From that particular angle I came. Right? So meeting them at their needs, which is exactly what I started doing by asking questions like, what does the following mean to you? What do you mean by a project? What does project management mean? And what are the management careers available or the careers available in project management? Oftentimes, parents also had a little bit of a blockage in their head. Oh, my son is going to be a web designer. My daughter is going to go into law. It doesn't matter. What is the definition of a project? You are the project. Your career is a project. Your personal life is a project. And how many careers do we have in project management? Anything that you see in everyday life is a project management career. So the drug that was discovered was a project management. How the drug should be discovered, distributed to the whole world is a project management. So everything has concepts in project management and agility. Right? And so what does leadership mean to you? Why is that critical to you? Leadership is required at all levels, right from everyone. That's the reason behind and-on code, right? If one thing fails, everybody come together to make sure that the production flows. Because the goal is on the flow. How can we say it's above my pay grade? It's not my area of expertise. This is not my forte. This is not my cup of tea. So all these things are coming and saying like, I'm not a leader. Who said you are not a leader? You are first a leader. Everybody is a leader. And what does leadership mean to you? How do you take control of these things? So a few example conversations. Okay, we are all going to a museum on a specific date for a spring break. Your group is now assigned to organize the trip. How do you go about organizing them? Whether they use Scrum, or whether they use Kanban, whether they use traditional approaches or Prince2 or XP or whatever it is, doesn't matter. I basically give them the tools and say, okay, go ahead and manage it. And now they are beginning to apply everything and say, okay, things are working out fine for me. I was able to manage it. The same thing, your community, neighborhood community is organizing a sale. How would you go about figuring this process? The next one is your parents' 20th anniversary is coming and you want to organize a party for them, but keep it a surprise for them. How would you go about organizing these things? These are simple examples of how project management applies, or how the concepts of agility applies in everyday life. In my theatric, I'm a theatrical actor, and I have done, agile projects within the theatrical setting, because the drama should be going on, and that is a release, and every scene is an iteration. Every practice is an iteration, right? So moving from one city to another city, or doing managing my career, everything is a project all by itself, and how you apply the whole concepts of agility and project management principles is what that comes to your mind. The concepts of risk and quality cannot be removed just because you are doing one kind of a project. And the things that I bring, 6 best friends, what are them? Why? What? Who? When? Where? How? These are the things that these are the 6 best friends that you will always have. I tell them and I bring them, how you continuously critically think. Simple things, says who, so what? And then I come up with my own approaches as to how you can expand on them. Right? And I also did a postdoctoral work, and I published this work, and I call it a TONES framework. It has a technical foundation. Technical does not necessarily mean it's IT or computer or anything like that. Domain knowledge that you need to have, whether it is law or healthcare or construction or chemical or whatever it is. What is the domain knowledge you are expected to have, and then the organizational knowledge. How you pull everything together, and how do you negotiate with different stakeholders for what can be done, and depending upon what resources are available. Next one is how you enable and empower other people to succeed, and your strategy began how you do all these things. These are very important because we don't want to become a helicopter parent where we choose to decide everything for our children. Because I have had people that come to me and say, Sriram, don't introduce agile concepts to my son or daughter because I don't want them to be in a technical area. I know agile doesn't work because in my company we did blah, blah, blah. And so it is not working. So I don't want my son to know all the failure patterns. Right? So I bring my approaches to and say, this is what I'm teaching. I'm not teaching agile. I'm giving them life skills. I'm giving them the life skills, right? And the approach that I have is structured in such a way that, first week, everybody get together and, the icebreakers and things like that, so that we are able to introduce ourselves and understand each other. So the basics of the team formation is getting started there. And then defining what to do based on availability. We have so much time available, we have so much information to cover. So people come and say, we will do this, we will do that, things like that. And as a result of the project itself gets started right there. Idea begin the project. Understanding the impact of cost and quality. What you can do, how you can do, what it is going to cost, how it is going to cost. For your personal decisions, right? Preparing for uncertainties, which is risk management. And then lobbying and communicating for support, which is stakeholder management and communication management. And then I too move for reviewing and continuing to work on your project that you have already been starting all over the place. So we have been able to, do a lot of success over here. We raised funds for Red Cross as a result of that. And all ideas came from the students. None of these things came from me. And students themselves wrote publications in PM Network. And everything is just in my home. There is simply no technology tool that was used. Yes, with the virtual communication, I introduced some of the tools and I gave them those tools as well and things like that. But, most of the thing is understand the main core process. And I also had, eminent speakers come and present, from the field, like Vice President of, medical devices in a pharmaceutical company, and a president of some other company who was able to come. And so I go talk to these people and say, this is what my students are. This is my makeup of the students. So please come and talk. And they come and do the talk. They're more than happy to come and do these talks over there. And some of the testimonials themselves, we are parents and we can also benefit from this. And these are some of the things that people themselves said, like, parents themselves were not able to understand some of this concept. And some of the people who were Scrum Masters and said, well, I learned more about Scrum than my Scrum training did in my company. The plot, which is the projecting leaders of tomorrow, generations of PMs advancing the profession. These are all things that are continuing to move forward repeatedly. And I even wrote a book. It's called Organized Common Sense, Why Project Management Skills Apply to Everyone. Although I say project management in my book, agility is part of this because progressive elaboration has been present for a long period of time. The all concepts of agility has been present from a long period of time. Agile is just one means to an end, not the only means to an end. So I talk about some of those principles, some of those important areas in a very simple examples of, a vacation, going to a vacation and writing some community projects and things like that. So based upon all these things, I try to write up a lot of different, bring concepts really to the home, as well as I have discussion questions for teachers, for students, for parents, and even for business organizations that can adopt these principles. Like a QA department wants to apply project management, IT department want to apply project management principles. And these things are already getting limelight. So the next steps, as I'm moving forward, is I'm working on a set of e-learning modules, especially with the virtual COVID-related challenges. I adapted to e-learning modules, and I tried that, and it worked very successfully with nobody coming and seeing each other and things like that. We still were able to do a lot of projects and things like that. So in what way you can help, or I can partner with you. So if you know of a group that can benefit from Plot, I would like to come and offer these things to the students in schools, in classes and things like that, so that I am able to help people solve their problems early on, or solve their challenges. The way I look at it is more of a life skills for them to lead themselves, because the most important project that they have to lead is themselves. With that, I will kind of wrap it up. And I have not been monitoring the chat window, so I will try to look at the chat window for any questions, but are there any questions for me?
So I have a question. So looking back at the slide where you were talking about the outcomes that were generated, what was the time frame, that the students were, spending their time to work on these things to generate those kind of results?
These were in about four weeks over here, week 7 to week 10. Do you see that in that 4-week time period, they are able to generate that, but up until that time frame, they are, farming, norming, farming, storming, norming before they move into the performing, so that they can get their project ready and, ideas ready and things like that. Mm-hmm. So it's a 1-month project approximately.
Excellent. So any other questions from the group? We got a new message. Okay. All right. In that case, thank you very much, Sriram. Truly appreciate it. And I even wrote a note to just sync up with you at a further point to talk about certifications. Sure. Excellent. So this actually takes us to the end of the second in our series of webinars this year. But the journey continues. It doesn't end here. We've got one more left. So next week, we hope that you can join us for the Future of Education, where we're going to be discussing student skill development, growth, and certification in support of workforce preparation, how that applies both to, K through 12 as well as higher education. We've got a great lineup of speakers. Tickets are still free. You can register. If you've already registered, you probably already have the link. And, at this point, we're just going to open it up for any questions or comments from, from anyone and everyone. One at a time. All right. Well, if there is nothing else, I want to thank all of you for showing up. Unfortunately, everybody couldn't stay till the end, but as I mentioned, we are going to be recording this. We're going to be editing out so that we can link to each speaker's presentation, as well as making the entire webinar available online. It's all going to be going up onto our YouTube channel. You can, for those who missed last week's deep dive into emerging ed tech, that is currently available on the L-EAF YouTube channel. I think it can be found. It's L-EAF.org. If you search for us on YouTube, you'll find us. We have it all in a playlist, so you can watch it straight through as if you were attending, but only with a focus directly on the speakers' presentations. And then we will be linking that back to their speakers pages, along with either links to their various assets and decks and whatnot that they're willing to share with us, so that you can visit it and check it out on in your leisure time as you prepare. And if this is something that is of interest to you, you'll be able to reach out to any of our speakers and find out how you can move forward and get some additional coaching and support for them. And with that, we will stop the recording and thank everybody for their time and wish you all